Hey, welcome to Mangomint's Feature Spotlight. Today we're going to be diving into staff management and permissions. This is going to be, pretty like text heavy, if you will, session. But just to zoom out a little bit, we're going to be covering some different scenarios. I figured we'd break it up, kind of thinking about what your business type is and how that would affect how you manage your staff, as well as what permissions you give them. So when we think about staff management, that's going to look a little bit different based upon what type of staff you have. Whether you are a business that is a rental environment, so you are the owner or property manager and you rent out to individual independent contractors, or maybe you are a spa where everyone is an employee. Or maybe you're a cooperative environment where, I've seen it where a couple different people come together and everyone's an admin and they kind of run their own books. So we're going to take a look at staff management and the permissions as it relates to each different unique scenario. And we're going to deep dive into each and every one of the permissions, what they mean, and how to use them. This is going to be recorded, so it will be available it will be emailed to you, but it'll also be available in the future if you want to tack back, maybe when you're considering changing something or want to restructure something. So with that, we're going to cover everything in regards to managing your staff and each permission. And then at the end, we will have some time for Q&A, but don't hesitate to go ahead and drop your questions into the chat as we go. Okay, so we're going to dive right into the software. And I'll share my screen. So staff management is always going to be found in your settings. Right off the bat, I will say that you'll only have access to manage staff members if you're an admin or have that permission. So as an admin on the account or as somebody who is in charge of adding staff members, that is something that you will only be able to do. We'll just jump right in here if you are an admin or have the ability to do so. So we're going to go through these permissions, but right away, if you already know you don't have access to that, you will need to ask an admin to give you access or make you an admin. So the first user we'll look at is an admin user. And what is an admin user? So if we were to create one here, we'll just put any email. Oops. And we input their details. We make this person an admin. Let's just go ahead and say that they are a service provider. When we create that admin user, that user will automatically have all permissions turned on. So an admin on any account is going to be kind of an overarching, they have access to everything. So when you select the gear icon as an admin user, you're going to see all of the different settings and areas you could adjust within the software. So that's number one. The second thing we're going to go into is adding a staff member who's a normal user. A normal user could still have varying levels of permission, but a normal user is generally going to be any user that isn't an owner, or let's say like a higher up, like a CEO of a company, or anyone whose permissions you want to control to some extent. So generally there'll be 1 to 2 admins on an account maximum. There would only ever be one billing user. And the billing user is the only user that has access to the subscription and can, update the card on file, cancel the account, and so on. So if you have one billing user, you can have multiple admins on an account. So if we looked in here, we can see that we have one admin. We just created another admin, but we will often have many normal users with different permission sets. Okay, so those are kind of those 3 different users and where you would find those in the software. Now, when we create a staff member in the software, you may have noticed that your subscription has a limit to the service providers. So I wanted to just show you inside of the staff member profile that is counted by any staff member who has is service provider toggled on. That means that this particular person does provide one or many services within the business. That is where the count is coming from as it relates to your subscription. And let's say you were on the Essentials plan and you were adding an 11th service provider, you are going to get that trigger that you would need to upgrade a plan in order to add an additional service provider. When you archive a staff member that's a service provider, that will take away from that count. So that's where that comes from. From there, we're going to take a look at some of the different elements of the staff member profile and the things that we would manage with our staff. Just from a broad point of view, if you're new to the software and you're setting things up, you may have not sent an invitation to your staff members yet. But it's important to take a look at everything in their profile and set up everything you need to set up in regards to permissions before you do that. Once you send them the invite, they are able to create a password and log in using their own email to the software and see whatever you have given them permission to see. When we create a new service provider or a normal user in the software, there are going to be a few things that are just turned on, and we'll talk about that in just a second. Some of the more general things that you want to go over, aside from are they a service provider, is will they be available in online booking? So you can turn that on here. If you have hourly employees, you're going to give them a time clock pin, let them pick their own pin, however you want to do that, if you do plan on using our internal time clock. In a few different places within the software, you're going to see additional options. This is worth exploring. This is generally going to give, something that's a little bit more nuanced that some might use, but some might not, but you're always going to find some like little golden nuggets in there. In this case, we have the ability to require a credit card in online booking. You can turn this off if, for example, one specific provider does not need or require a card for online booking. This is where, when I mentioned at the beginning, we want to address each type of business. There might be that cooperative environment where everyone's their own contractor, but they all work together. And one of them doesn't want to require cards in online booking. So that is available here. If you have gender preferences for booking and you want them to apply to the staff members, for example, I see this very common in spa environments where you have massage therapists and you want your client to be able to select from those, you would need them to match up to what is in the staff member profile. So if that is something you're using, you're going to want to make sure that you align those on the profile along with the service. Otherwise, not necessary. Next is locations. You're only going to see this if you do in fact have multiple locations of your salon or spa. Notifications are going to be notifications that are going to this staff member. So do you want them to receive a text when new online bookings are created, updated, removed, being canceled? Do you want them to receive those notifications when you internally book something on their calendar? Send an email when online bookings are created. I'll give one example. The salon that I owned years ago now, we were using Mangomint, and my service providers were responsible for essentially auditing their own online bookings. So we didn't have a front desk person full time. So we had this on, and then whether it's once a day or whenever they get an online booking, they would receive an email and they could just check over that client to ensure that they did in fact book the right service. If they saw that Sally booked a partial highlight when she usually books full highlights, they might need to make an adjustment there. So that's available. And this final notification is all about our two-way texting. So we have our two-way texting now available in the software. You can get unlimited texting for $75 a month, and this becomes your salon's phone number. This is also the phone number that all of your appointment notifications are going out from. You can see those here. If you add on two-way texting, your customers can actually respond to you there. Now, this setting is interesting because if you are using two-way texting and you do want this particular person to receive push notifications, so those are the notifications, that show up as like a little banner on your phone, this is going to show on their phone. Keep in mind, this is going to show all of the messages. So it's not just specific to that service provider's clients. So that will also tack back to one of the permissions we go into. But that's what those are. Before we go into permissions, I'm just going to touch on a couple other things in the staff member profile. And those are going to be what we see from this point of view. So from the service point of view on the staff profile, we have made some adjustments recently if you haven't seen it, but it makes it a lot easier to say, Adam provides all of these services, so we can turn them all on with the click of one button for each category. From there, a couple things to note. Oftentimes in a scenario where you have different levels, so you might have level 1, level 2 stylists. In a spa, you might have, a junior esthetician versus a senior esthetician. You can have the same service, but that service provider, maybe they charge more because they're a senior esthetician. Or if they're a junior esthetician, maybe they take a bit longer. So you can actually customize the timing and the pricing per service provider. This is also very useful in a scenario of, say, a hair salon where some of your stylists do double book. So they allow for, I take a partial highlight and I am going to accept a client in the time when that partial highlight is processing. So in order to see what that looks like, we'll go down here. So if we do double book and the default is sent to a full duration, meaning the entire hour and 45 would be blocked out, if this provider allows for double booking, we could say that they then have 45 minutes of processing time where they can actually hands-on take a second customer. And that is going to open a 45-minute slot in your online booking. If they then have to return to this customer and do their blow dry, you can add that here. But I've also seen scenarios where maybe they're with this client for an hour and then the processing time is another hour where they can take another partial highlight and maybe an assistant comes in and does the finishing work. So they don't need any finishing time. So you can really build that out however you want, but it does give you that kind of shadowed appointment time where there is processing time. And I'll show you that on the calendar in just a moment. We can also adjust commission per service. So if your service provider is set up with compensation, so let's just say, normal, they get 45%, but on specific services like color services that might have a higher cost of good, we can actually adjust just the commission on that specific service type. So we can say that this one is 42%. So depending on how you do your pricing, your compensation, there's lots of customization there. Work hours are generally going to be the same regardless of your business model. Work hours in Mangomint, however, are what creates availability in online booking, for example. So if your staff members don't have their work hours here, there's not going to be any availability in online booking. In order to create repeating shifts, you'll add them in. And I have a couple examples already set up here of different scenarios I've seen. So like, how do we schedule in a lunch? And there's two ways to do that. One is by building the shift in this way, where you've built them from 8 to 1:30. There's a 30-minute gap, and then they close the day from 2 to 6:30. So that's one way to build it. If you find that lunches are variable and oftentimes you're dragging them around in order to accommodate a customer or a client booking, I recommend using our time blocks. So with the time block, you can actually say, here is the lunch that we suspect will be at 12:30 every week. we have made that repeating. And in order to make that repeating, you'll just head to these three little, because that is a repeating one. So we'll go ahead and put a time block in here just to show you. So we've created a time block. We're going to say that this is the estimated lunch every week. We can go ahead and make that repeating every week. Now, in the scenario that Andre decides to take lunch late that day, we'll just drag and drop it and save. Similar to your, Google Calendar, iCal, we're just going to change this time block where next Wednesday will remain the original time block we set at 12:35. So those are the two ways to input those lunches and set those things up if you need it. We're going to talk more about time blocks once we get into permissions, because those are definitely things that come up. Do you allow your staff to create their own time blocks? Things like that. Okay, so that is your staff management. Each staff member has their own, like this portal basically. So we can go into each staff member and we can see all of those things. Generally, you're going to set it up once. And then, moving forward, as their role changes or as something changes, you might change some permissions. So more importantly, we're going to dive into all of the permissions. And I just want to highlight something you may or may not have seen. If you're logged into the software, you can click your name in the upper right-hand corner. There you will see our Learning Center. And one of the things that just recently launched, let me pull you in here. So when we click Learning Center, we are taken into the Learning Center. And today we're focusing on staff members. So everything I've just gone over is broken down into these beautiful, beautiful visual articles that are up to date with photos, the difference between an admin and normal, and so on. The staff member permissions has just been updated, and we've added a lot of color in terms of what they mean. So we're going to go through those together because sometimes you read them and you're still a bit confused. So we're going to hop back into the software and I'm going to show you where these live. Again, from the calendar view, you'll go to settings, you'll go to staff members, and we're going to start with a normal user. Again, an admin would have all permissions turned on. There are some permissions that are basically just standard turned on based upon what we've seen and what's like most common. But we will also take a look at what they all mean. So you can see I have different settings for each of these users, and we're going to dive in a bit further. So zooming out, if you've got a business where you have employees, you're going to want to pay special attention to each of these permissions. That is because in the employee model, you will likely need more control over what your staff members and service providers can do in the software than, say, a business where everyone is, a contractor or a renter, and they need more control over their own data because they technically own their own business, renting space from within yours. So what do I mean by that? We'll start by the most common. In a model where you have a staff and your staff are really just responsible for the appointments booked with them and the clients that see them. With that, you will generally give them permission to book and change their own appointments, but you may not give them permission to book and change other people's appointments. That means when they go to the calendar, because these are calendar set permissions, that person is only going to see their own day on the calendar. So let's just take a look. So this is what it would look like. They're not going to see everyone else that's working that day. So when we tack back to what we're looking at, if we're in the calendar, they can now book, change, and cancel on their own calendar only. Now, I've also seen it be very common. I'll use the scenario of the salon that I once owned. We all worked very collaboratively, meaning we didn't have a front desk full time. So if I had color processing and the phone rang, I might book an appointment for someone else. In order to do that, I needed the permission to be able to book and change other people's appointments as well. Also being able to view. So you've got both options here. Viewing only does not allow them to change appointments, but it does allow them to see when they're available. And then booking is the same, being able to book, change, cancel when another staff member is assigned. Kind of the next step is like, okay, we've got that person booked, but when a customer or client comes in and we need to check them into service, so we've got them confirmed and now we're checking them into service, do they have the permission to do so? So again, heading back to Adam's permissions, yes, we want Adam to be able to check clients in. Time blocks are something I covered in regards to lunch, but time blocks are often used for a lot of different things. Maybe it's a personal matter. They have a doctor's appointment. They have to leave early one day. If you have someone on your team that manages those things, so they're, a manager, a front desk coordinator, and they are in charge of, let's say Harriet comes in and says, hey, I have to run out for whatever it is. You can determine, is Harriet in charge of keeping her calendar up to date, or does Harriet inform a front desk person, a manager, or the owner, and the owner then places that time block? If the answer is you want Harriet to take that off your plate and they're an adult and they need to manage their own schedule, then yes, you do want them to be able to create and change their own time blocks. You're still going to see it on their calendar, and you'll see that they created it. But do you want them to be able to do that for others as well? Generally, that's a no, but again, really depends on your unique setup. So those are time blocks for themselves, for others. And then the final calendar permission is about our wait list. So can they manage the wait list? The reason I love this permission to be on is, let's say that Adam here, who's fully booked the rest of the day, has somebody on the wait list. If in fact Adam, has a no-show, or, somebody texts them to cancel, or whatever the scenario is, Adam would be able to see that on their calendar and either reach out directly if they do have access to client details, or if, again, you have a front desk and they manage all that, Adam won't need to do anything. The front desk person will do it for them. The wait list is going to show them who's on the wait list, what service they're on for, and then they can get them booked in. So if you want your staff members to be able to reach out to customers and book people in from the wait list, or add someone to the wait list, I know that happens often. Somebody might reach out, hey, I'm fully booked, I can put you on the wait list. Then you would want to give them that permission. That said, clients and accessing client contact details. This is one of the most common permissions I get asked about. I'm curious if you're, whether you're a salon or spa owner, drop into the chat, like, do you allow for your providers to see client contact details? From what I've seen, maybe a yes or a no, or a thumbs up if you do, thumbs down if you don't. It's pretty 50-50 from what I've seen. I have worked in environments where, that information was proprietary. You couldn't take your clients with you. But I've also worked in environments where it's kind of, they want everyone to, if they leave, they take their clients with them. It's really based on your culture and how you've built things. It is more common in a commissioned environment or a larger scale salon or spa that they wouldn't have client contact details. Now, earlier I mentioned our two-way texting, and you would imagine with two-way texting, we can see the phone number, we can see the client's name, but something really interesting that we have allowed for is now with Mangomint's two-way texting, you can still limit the staff member from seeing client contact details, but still being able to text them using their name through the software. So if you are one of those businesses that does need to protect that proprietary information, but you still want a way for your clients to directly communicate not only to the salon or spa, but to their service provider, you can actually create a really secure environment by turning off the ability for that service provider to see phone number and email, but still giving them a way to get in touch with those clients if needed. So if you have any questions about how that works, please let us know. Everyone has access to two-way texting. If you aren't subscribed to it, you'll still see it because your automated messages go from there. And then you do get 5 free texts per month. So you can definitely test that out. Okay, moving on to sales permissions. Pretty much everything in the next few sections, you could default to turning those things off. If you're just working with, service providers that provide services and they don't really have any front desk or software functions beyond who's on their day, they're back-to-back booked. These are generally not going to be settings that those types of service providers would need. However, if you like more information and you like everyone in your business to be able to step in and take over the front desk from their login, these are going to be important. So sales is relating to the sales tab. So when we click on sales, this is where we can see an entire list of the sales that have been closed out through the software, opened or closed. So when we have a sale here, there are different actions that can be taken. Can we reopen it? Do we void it? If we need to process a refund, all of those things are going to happen in the sales tab. So this is a pretty important permission to pay attention to because these are things that can affect your books and your record keeping of monies in. So can they view sales on the calendar is a little bit different, and that's a pretty common one to have on because generally all that's doing is allowing that service provider to, let's go ahead and check something out. So we have this checked out. Actually, we don't need that on there. When this is checked out, I don't have an amount. We have to charge a lot for Botox. Let's say she's getting 40 units. Okay, so now we have a sale checked out. There is a sale on the calendar where we can view it here. This is the most common place to allow your service providers to see the sale because they see, okay, I charged the right amount or they charged the right amount. I got that plugged in. We're good to go. What you don't have to do is allow them to actually go into the sale in the sales page. It is very common for a front desk person to have that permission because oftentimes that might be where they need to go in and reopen the sale. Maybe they forgot to add some products in. So those permissions, here we go, are going to be here. So can start a checkout and modify sales. They can reopen sales. They can make changes to services and products. So in the example I just gave, that's what that would do. This is a view only. So this allows them to see the sales screen, but it doesn't allow them to modify. This is where they can begin to modify. Then we have can sell non-retail products. This is adding products from non-retail categories during checkout. This is something that might be a little bit newer, but the idea here is in our products, you may or may not be using this. Not only can you have all your retail items, but we do now have the ability to have a product that is non-retail. So this would be a product that you're not selling on a shelf, but you might want the permission to do so. It's kind of like an override. Maybe you ran out of whatever it was, but you had a couple on back bar and you're selling it, even though the producer has a big sticker that says it's not a retail item. So that's up to you, but that's what that permission is. And then we have refunding payments. This is where things definitely gets a bit sensitive. So if you're using Mangomint Pay and you want to control over who can process refunds or not, this is where that's going to be. And again, this is most common seen in just front desk coordinators, managers, admins. All right. Thank you, Ria. You have one of my stylists didn't see the sales tab show up. Is it because she was on the mobile app? Likely no. Our mobile app actually is the same. Obviously, it's a different layout because it's, optimized for mobile, but I would check their permission set. So if they do not have can view all sales turned on, when they go into mobile, let me just pull it up on mine. You're not going to see it, but basically when they go on to mobile, they're going to click the three lines in the lower right-hand corner of the app. Let me see if I can even show that. So those three lines. And then when they click those three lines, the first thing, the first option there is the sales. So if they don't have that, it's likely because of their permission set. Ria, I'm happy to take a look at that particular account. After we hop off the webinar, we can look at your account if you want to send me that provider's name in a little bit. Okay, so refunding payments was the last one on sales, and I didn't see any other questions on that. So let's dive into messages. I already touched on this a couple times, and I love this. I think this is a game changer for many reasons. This was something I always struggled with, thinking about how do we really streamline the communication so nothing gets lost. I can't tell you as a service provider how many times someone would show up at the salon and they would, be like, I have an appointment, I was texting with such and such. And Maria goes, oh, sorry, my text deleted. I don't have the message they said. Well, with Mangomint adding on our two-way texting, you will now have record of that conversation. So if that was with, a specific person and we said, well, let me make sure that's actually a sample. Yeah, for sure. If we had a text conversation with this specific person, we can say, can you come tomorrow at 1? Well, maybe that person never did respond. We would have that logged here. Or if for any reason that did not go through, we would also have that logged there. So we now have a way to track all of these things in one place and go back, hey, you've been added from the wait list. Like we can see this entire conversation thread. So the other thing you can do is this phone number is a phone number that is unique to your business, and it's used for all your automated and two-way texting. It is not a mass texting number because, as you know, if you did hop into that webinar we did when we launched two-way texting, those numbers often get flagged, or those are the ones people opt out of. So we really want this to be the way that your clients can communicate with you. This can be a number you even share, like, hey, send us a text. You can give them that number and they can text directly through to you. One of the things that I notice is there is some hesitancy here to give that permission to your staff members. But the cool thing is we have the ability for them to just view conversations and message history for clients that are visible to this person. So that means, if you've got client ownership set up, or if this is somebody who's, this is just going to be the clients that they see, this doesn't allow for them to send messages, but they can see like, hey, did this client write in to say they were running late? Just gives them the insight there. I personally really love the idea of allowing them to send messages to these clients that are visible. The reason for this is I love the idea that I book an appointment somewhere. I might fill out a form, but to be honest, sometimes I fill out those facial forms and it kind of feels like you're going to a doctor's appointment, and I don't really know what those things are. And I do have sensitivity here, but am I combination or am I sensitive? Now, I wouldn't necessarily text all those because I'm not that annoying, but if I filled out the form and I filled it out weird, I just think it would be so cool to have that provider say like, hey, I was a little unclear. Do you have rosacea or not? And I could just text with them right there. And then that is going to live in my profile. So I'm now able, as the service provider, to see the history that I have with that client. I'm trying to text myself from here. Maybe not, but I can now go into that profile and I can see that communication with that specific client and make sure that I have a good history there. Especially if they didn't fill out their form, you can send them a text. They can go in and do that. So I personally, big proponent for using the two-way texting in that way and allowing your staff members to reach out. You can, of course, use that just for your front desk, just for your managers. and they can view all conversations and so on. Now, I mentioned this earlier, and I need to catch my breath because I feel like I'm just like going hard on the messages. But one thing to note is those push notifications that I mentioned earlier, these are when somebody has access to this, and they are going to get a notification for any message. So that's what that is for. They won't get push notifications if they can't view all conversations. That might change, may have already changed, but that's something to note. So I really like the push notifications for like your manager. And of course, if they're off for the weekend, a manager would have access to go in and turn those off, you know, pretty easy to do there. Okay. Any questions with where we've got so far? Ria, awesome. I just checked and it's not toggled on for her. Will that allow her to see all sales? Yes, if you give permission. So Ria's question was, she said, I'm an admin, so I see it all. She had one service provider that she checked. She was saying she didn't see the sales in her mobile app. So what that means is in the sales list, they had this turned off. So if that's turned off, they're not going to see all the sales. But yes, if that is turned on, they are going to see all the sales. Now, before it even goes there, I've had people say before, oh, well, we don't want them to see the sales for other providers. Well, I'm telling you right now, you would have to be a certain class of crazy to literally go through and add up all of the, like if you were trying to find something, this isn't giving you reporting. It's just giving you this look at sales. So yes, if this is, you know, sensitive information that you do not want one staff member to see another staff member's sales in any way, do not give that permission. But I'm here to tell you it would be pretty difficult to like really collect good data from this. So again, I wouldn't put it past if you've had issues with that in the past, then just turn that off. Okie doke. Reporting. This is pretty simple. Do you want this person to have access to your company reporting? Reporting is all or nothing. And before anybody drops it into the chat, it is on our radar. We hear it. We know you want, you know, report specific permissions. It's not something prioritized for us right now, because ultimately, if I have Harriet and it's the end of the pay period, and Harriet wants her specific detailed view of her entire sales in March, I can generate it, literally download PDF, drop it into a chat, and send it to her within 30 seconds. So if there is information specific to a specific person, it's pretty quick and easy just to pull that report. But nonetheless, we do have that on our radar. It's just currently all or nothing. So if you turn on reports, they are going to see every report for your entire business. This is generally only going to be a manager admin who has that permission. Moving down, products. This is one that I've seen many organizations that might have somebody who manages product or purchase orders. So they're just creating the purchase order, sending it to the rep or getting it approved by a manager. Manager sends it to rep. The purchase comes in and they open up the invoice, unpack the order. They open up purchase orders in Mangomint and they check that order in. So it might look like this. Everything's here. Maybe something wasn't, but if it's all here, they receive all and close. So that's one permission. If you have somebody who's in charge of ordering and somebody who's in charge of restocking, you can just give them that. That said, oftentimes there's one-offs or just like little nuance in product management. If that person needs to be able to access the entire products list and make very like detailed changes, or I've seen, for example, if somebody needed to do a recount, you will need to give them permission to manage products. So that was the first permission there. There we go. So can manage products. That's the product tab, where the other one is the purchase order. Gift cards. This is one that I like to break down a little bit. So in Mangomint, you can technically add a gift card if you have access to gift cards, and nobody has to pay for that gift card. So let's say I just gave somebody $100 gift. We donated it to charity. I could create this, and then somebody could come in and use that gift card. So this permission I do not take lightly, because you really only want to give this permission to someone who really understands that this is not selling gift cards. This is just the management or the ability to adjust or delete a gift card. So managers need to have this permission, generally, owners, admins, but your service providers probably don't. Even many of your front desk people will generally only ever sell a gift card. They wouldn't necessarily need to be able to manage or adjust it. Let's say they did and they can't figure out where to go and do that. Oftentimes they'll reach out through chat, and all we can do is let them know, hey, in order to adjust the amount on a gift card or manually create a gift card, you'll need to let one of your admins know. So we will always refer them to an admin that has that permission. Memberships. This is all about managing memberships. If you are a membership-based salon or spa, we also have webinars just specifically on that topic. But again, generally not big for service providers. This is going to be more your front desk, anybody who's in charge of, kind of revenue things, like do they need to be able to start them, make adjustments. In a smaller business, this might be many people. So many people might wear that hat of getting people started with a membership. Memberships are all started from the membership portal, so they have to start them here. You can't start them from a sale. So I would make sure that you really think about, if you were doing an upsell of a membership at the chair and you wanted your service providers to be able to do that, you would have them turn that permission on. The second membership setting is the actual setup of a membership. So probably barely anyone needs that permission. That's just being able to build a new membership or change your current memberships. Like, hey, our membership used to have 10% off products. Now it has 8. Who's in charge of changing that? They should have this permission. The good old cash drawer. Cash is king, right? Even though barely anyone accepts, or not that they don't accept it, but it just doesn't roll through very much anymore. So the cash drawer, it's nice, it's simple. This is going to give them access. So anybody who's doing the count at the end of the day, anybody who's doing pay-ins or payouts, maybe they had to run to the store for supplies and you want them to be the one logging it, you can do that here. That said, if you have a low use cash drawer, you can pretty much just have like a manager with that permission. And even if you give them $20 out of the drawer, they can hand you the receipt after, and whoever's in charge can always track that payout. So the people with the permission should be the people who truly are in charge of counting the cash drawer and logging it there. The time clock screen, I'm going to get a little bit into detail with. So especially if you have employees that, maybe your salon or spa is a bit bigger and you want to reduce the amount of risk involved with a time clock, mainly the manipulation of a time clock, pay close attention. So viewing the time clock screen, all this is doing is giving access, whether it's through the app or through being logged in, to go into the app and see the time clock screen. So I could clock in from the app on my phone. Now, keep in mind, our time clock is not geosensitive. So there's no way to say, hey, you're more than 300 feet from the salon or spa, so this isn't going to work. The reason I bring this up is one of the very easy workarounds is to only give time clock access to your front desk staff who will be logged in at the front of the salon or spa, or you can have like a login. So this could be front desk or admin, and that permission is only given to that login on the front desk. The login on the front desk stays logged in, and you save the password on that computer. So nobody has that login information if you need more control over where people can clock in. Otherwise, If you know, like, and trust the person who's clocking in and out, you can give them permission to clock in and out from wherever they are. Managing the time cards, this would only be for somebody who is in charge of editing and updating time cards. So the time clock looks like this, whereas only somebody with this permission could actually see manage time cards and go in and be able to make adjustments here. All right, we're wrapping up the permissions. So I'm going to pause really quick and just take a look. Ria mentioned in the chat, we're more of a mobile salon, and stylists and this stylist sells product outside of appointments. Got it. So you would need to give the permission to create a new sale if you wanted them to create the sale from the sales channel without creating an appointment. That's how that would work. So they would see all sales, but they would give them the ability to start a new checkout. So what I'm referring to is the permission in regards to sales. So let's say in that scenario, you're a mobile business and you have already checked out that sale for the service. If you want them to be able to sell product, you do need to toggle on can start a checkout and modify sales in order for them to be able to go to sales and hit new checkout and just add product in. So that would be necessary in order to do that. Okay, so back to our final permissions. Where am I? Just really getting used to going in there. You're all going to be professionals after this. Okay, so a couple more things. We have our forms. And this is generally always going to be on. If you have forms, you know, the whole point of forms are to inform that service provider or the business of certain details, make sure they've signed away for liability, things like that. So this is going to be very common that they can view the forms that the client has submitted. Can they view all form submissions? That's up to you. That is the actual form submission tab that shows every form that's been submitted. And then form templates. This should only be turned on for somebody who's actually editing and building the templates. Resources, we actually had a webinar on this last week. Highly recommend visiting that to dive deeper, but this is generally only going to be for somebody who is more heavily inside of the business. How do we set things up, especially in a spa environment where you have multiple rooms? You might have a laser machine, you might have a hydrofacial machine, and there's a lot of management of resources. The staff member really only sees it from the point of view of like, hey, do I have the resource I need available? And if your resources are set up, then yes, they should for all their booked appointments. Do you want them, however, to be able to see resources on the calendar? So while they can see their own column, do you want them to also see that room or chair as a separate column on the calendar? For most providers, they don't need to see that. That's up to you. A couple other things here. These settings are definitely going to be more managerial. So being able to manage staff. In order to do what we're doing right now, if you don't have this on, you're not going to see other staff. So you would need to toggle that on for anyone who's in charge of managing staff or permissions. Service settings, similar. When you go to settings, do you want them to be able to change services, change the online booking settings? This is usually kind of like a set it and forget it piece where you set up your services, and unless something has changed on your menu, no one really needs access to that. Let's say 6 months down the line, you know, I've seen it before where someone's like, hey, why is this service suddenly not available in online booking? Well, it's because they had given that permission to somebody who didn't really know what they were doing. And they went in changing a service that they thought was their own service, but it really was the whole business service. So again, permissions are important. You don't usually need to give permission to manage the entire business's services to one service provider. A manager, that's a different story. Payment accounts is if you have multiple payment accounts. So if you have renters and everyone collects their own monies for services rendered, this is what multiple payment accounts would be, or like being able to access the payment accounts. If you have a manager that helps your renters set up their payment accounts, you're generally going to give them that permission. But other than that, not many people need permission to your payment accounts. And finally, the user profile. So earlier I said, we had the scenario where the staff member changed a service for the whole business. What they should have had on was the ability to edit their own work schedule. So here, as well as change their own service, durations, pricing right here in their staff member profile. So those are commonly turned on in a rental model or any model where the provider themselves sets their own schedule, sets their own pricing, sets their own timing. And then finally, if you've got, a goal-oriented business where you want your staff to be thinking about what they've produced in that week, in that time period, we have a screen on the app called View Daily Weekly Totals. They access that just like I had mentioned before. Open the app, hit the 3 lines in the bottom right-hand corner, and they can view their own daily or week-to-date number of services, service revenue, product revenue, tips, I think pre-booking percentage, and so on. So those are our permission sets. This is actually the first time I have gone through every single one out loud. Generally, I, will send people here to the Learning Center where they can go through for themselves, see where to find those things and all of the permission sets. Please keep in mind, it isn't uncommon for us to have a staff member reach out and send us a message through chat support and say, hey, I'm trying to do this thing and I can't. And unfortunately, we can't do it for them, but we can inform them that they don't have the permission to do whatever it is they're looking to do. And in that case, we will refer them back to their admin. But these permissions are really you saying, here's the boundary of what you can do in the account that we own. The billing user is always the customer, the person that we go to. You would have to be an admin for us to give any additional information to, and so on. So that's how we look at permissions and the permissions we have within the software. What questions do we have about that? Oh, awesome, Maria. Thanks for that. Yeah, so, it sounds like a unique setup you have where, just the ability to sell a product. And that would be through the sales screen is the only way to create a new sale. And that is that permission. Otherwise, within the software, all of your staff member and staff management, if you have like very specific or nuanced questions, you can always reach out through chat support and we can help work you through that. In conclusion, that is our staff membership or staff management and permissions breakdown. I'll say one of the highlights for me is really just seeing where some of those permissions solve a lot of challenges, like client proprietary information, being able to hide client contact details, but still give your staff a way to communicate with their clients where you can still have some insight into that and some management over it. So with that, that is, we'll open up to any other questions. Let's see. I had gotten one, but it looks like they didn't, I got an email in prepping for it. And actually that might've been the one about sales. Yeah, we answered that. Okay, cool. So with that, I'll let you go. Again, if you end up having questions about permissions, how they work, while you can go to the Learning Center, just know we're always here on chat support to help work out whatever it is that you need. And we'd love to hear your feedback. Have a wonderful day.